This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so as I said, we're going to be doing some Megillat Esther action this week, and then we will resume to our usual programming of the Parsha. So in the Stone Chumash on page 1252. Okay. Vayhi bimei Achashverosh, and it was during the times of Achashverosh, and the Gemara says Achashverosh, that everyone who's mentioned his name would say Ach Larosh, ay 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 ay, right? He was causing problems all around. He ruled over 127 provinces. Pasuk Bet, very important. V'yamahim, in those days when Achashverosh sat on his throne. Asher b'Shushan Habira, the throne that was in Shushan, the capital city. Interesting. The Vilna Gaon tells us there's a backstory to over here, and that is Achashverosh was not of royal descent, and we'll see this as it comes with the interplay of him and Vashti at the party coming up soon. Achashverosh was not of royal descent, and therefore he had a little bit of an inferiority complex, and he needed to bolster his credentials, and therefore he wanted to have the stone, the exact chair, throne, replica of the throne that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, had. But the stone for that was only found in Shushan. So therefore he moved the entire capital to Shushan in order to have this throne that would give him the sense of, I'm really deserving of this position. And that's why it says when he sat al kisei malchuto, which was where? B'Shushan Habira. Now it was his throne, the Kisei Malchuto, the throne of his kingdom, was specifically in Shushan. And this is showing us, as we mentioned before in other classes, but the whole idea of Purim, and the reason we discussed last week during our lunch and learn about Purim, the eternal holiday, the eternity of Purim is that we see how God is working behind the scenes, making everything come into place. Whereas the other holidays were sound and light shows. We had the plagues, we had the Exodus, we had the splitting of the sea, we had Mount Sinai, and all of those overt miracles will be eclipsed by the miracles of the Messianic times. But Purim is seeing God's hand behind the scenes in everything that takes place. And the Vilna Gaon says that starts right over here in the very second pasuk. And that is, Achashverosh thought, I'm moving the kingdom to Shushan because I need my throne. I need my Solomon-like throne. And that's why he moved it all. But in fact, that's not why he moved it. The reason he moved it is, just one second. If you look on page 1253, down chapter 2, verse 5, it's the bold lettered in our stone Chumash, otherwise Perek Bet Pasuk Hey, chapter 2, verse 5. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan Habira. There was an Ish Yehudi, there was a Jewish man in Shushan Habira. Ushmo, and his name was Mordechai ben Yorev ben Shimi ben Kish Ish Yemini. There was a Jewish man there. Mordechai was in Shushan. So Achashverosh moved the whole kingdom, the whole capital to Shushan because he wanted the throne, or so he thought. But behind the scenes, Hashem is orchestrating. Why did he move the whole kingdom to Shushan? Because the hero, or one of the two heroes, actually the second hero of the story, the number one hero is Esther, but the second hero is Mordechai. And where was he? He was in Shushan. And therefore, will move the whole kingdom to Shushan to make it more convenient for Mordechai and the interceding and the role that he needs to play. Pasuk Gimel, going back to the beginning. On the third year of his reign, he made a tremendous party celebration, and we go into detail about how lavish this party was. He did it for all his officers and everyone. Why in the third year of his reign? So according to some, that is when the throne was ready. But others, the Gemara explains as follows. He waited for the third year to make this party. What was this party a celebration of? Not of his reaching, of his investiture, of his becoming the king. This is the third year of his reign. But they all knew the prophecy of in 70 years, God said the Jews will be redeemed. And they all calculated those 70 years. And we mentioned before, Belshazzar calculated the 70 years and made a party to celebrate the end of the 70 years, because the end of the 70 years meant if the Jews had not been redeemed, then the Jews were not going to be redeemed. And Judaism was over. And that's why Belshazzar celebrated, and he took out the garments of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, and the vessels of the Mishkan, because now they could be used with impunity. And that's when there was the handwriting on the wall, which told them, you've overstepped, you've taken the vessels, takal, mana, takal tavar. You've taken the vessels, you will be broken. And he was killed that night. Achashverosh said he calculated, but he miscalculated. I will calculate, but I will not miscalculate. And on the third year of his reign, that's when he thought the 70 years had been completed. And therefore he threw this big party. And we say over here, Barato Posik Dalu, when he showed it, Osher Kavod Malchutov et Yikar Tiferet Gedulato, he showed the honor and the riches and the glory. Tiferet is a term that is used for the garments of the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. That's what he wore. And then he made another big party over here for everyone else over there. And we get to Pasuk Zayin, verse 7. All of a sudden we switch from the very, very light and upbeat tune for Megillat Esther. And then we switch, V'hashkot, Zahav, and they were given to drink from golden vessels. And then we switch our tune, V'chelim, Mikelim Shonim, and the vessels, right? No two goblets were alike. That's a simple meaning. But the deeper meaning, and the reason we switched our tune to that of Eicha, to that of Lamentations, to that of Tisha B'Av, to that of the destruction of the temple, is because these kelim were different sorts of kelim. These vessels were different sorts of vessels. These vessels were vessels from the Beit HaMikdash, from the temple. Vashtiya kedat ein ones posichet, and the drinking was done, no one was forced. Kichen yisada melech al karav beso lasot kirtzon ish v'ish. That's how the king had ordered that everyone should do according to the desires, the wills of each and every person. So the simple meaning is over here, no one was forced. Everyone did as they wanted. The Vilna Gaon explains that Megillat Esther actually, in addition to the actual story on the surface, is a whole different story. It's the story of mankind. It's the story of the soul. It's the story of this world and what it offers. And Achashverosh is life is one big party. And we say over there that no one is forced. In this world, we all have our free will. No one is forced. And everyone does kirtzon ish v'ish. Everyone does whatever each person wants. But the Gemara says, Kertzon ish v'ish. There are two people who in the Megillah itself are referred to as Ish, as a man. One of them we read before, Ish Yudi Haya b'Shushan Abira. There was an Ish Yudi. Mordechai was in Shushan Abira. And also, when later on in the story, which we'll get to hopefully today, when Esther points at Haman, she says, Ish Sar v'oyev Haman hara hazeh. Haman is also called an Ish. So the Gemara says, who's Ish v'ish? So on a simple level, the Gemara is saying, who's Ish and Ish? Mordechai and Haman. They were both officers in Achashverosh's kingdom, and they were the ones who were in charge of this big party. And therefore, everything went according to the whims and the instructions of Ish v'ish, Mordechai and Haman. But on the deeper level, the Vilna Gaon explains, this world is a world of a party. Everything's in front of us. And no one is forced. We all make our choices. And we all have to take responsibility for our choices. To do the Ratzon Ish v'ish, no one is forced. If you want to become a Mordechai, an Ish, you can become a Mordechai. If you want to become an Ish, if you want to become a Haman, you can become that. Everyone has the choice, has the options to become the greatest or to become the lowest. Pasuk Tet, verse 9. Gam Vashti Amalka Asa Mishnan Hashem Beit HaMalchut Asher Melech Achashverosh. Also, Vashti the queen made a party for the women in the Beit HaMalchut. B'yom HaShvi, on the seventh day, when Achashverosh's heart was good with wine, he said, Lavi, Pasuk Yud Aleph 11, Lavi et Vashti Amalka, to bring Vashti the queen before the king, Beket Malchut, with her royal crown. And the sages say he wanted her to come only with the royal crown, but unclothed besides that. Larot et Hamim, to show everyone her beauty. Kitava Marehi, because she was very beautiful. Batma'ain, Hamalka Vashti Lavo, but Vashti the queen refused to come. Bidvar Melech Asher Biyad Asarisim, to come and fulfill the word of the king. Very interesting. Who did he want brought? Vashti Hamalka. Who does Pasuk Yud Bet 12 say refused to come? Hamalka Vashti. We hear the switch. He wanted Vashti the queen to come. Who refused to come? Queen Vashti. What's happening over here? This is the power play that I alluded to before. Achashverosh was not of royal descent. Vashti was. She was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. She was of royal descent. He married her very much because that's what gave credibility to his reign, to his position. I'm married to the granddaughter of royalty. I'm married to royalty. So he wanted who to come? Vashti Hamalka. In Hebrew, the adjective follows the noun. In English, the adjective precedes the noun. In English, it was a red ball. Adjective red, noun, ball. In Hebrew, it's kadur, adom. First the noun, and then the adjective. Who did he want to come? Vashti. Who is she? She is Vashti. That's who and what she is. And she happens to be, what's the adjective? Hamalka. She happens to be the queen. Who refused to come? Hamalka Vashti. Her response was, excuse me? I'm not Vashti, your queen. I am the queen. I am the one of royal lineage over here. I am Hamalka. and you may call me Vashti. But don't forget who is who over here. Batma'ain, Hamalka, Vashti, Pasuk Yud verse 12. Queen, I know the English. Yeah, good. They changed the English also. Good. And Queen Vashti refused to come. Now, on this deeper Kabbalistic level, Achashverosh is the goof, is the body in this world. And the body, like we said, throws big parties. And there is also the soul that joins the body. The original soul was a Vashti, not an uplifted soul. Vashti, now, on this deeper level, when it says Hamelech Achashverosh, that refers to King Achashverosh. When it just says Hamelech, that refers to God. So at the end of this party, God says, bring Vashti, meaning at the end of the party, which is our life on this world, God says, bring Vashti, let the neshama, let the soul come. With what? Keter Malchut, with the crown. What is the crown? The crown is that which we have accomplished in our life. And now we understand on a deeper level when we say Vashti was naked, he wanted to come naked, meaning all of the physicality, any of the materialism, we don't bring that with us. All we bring with us at the end of our life when we go before Hamelech, before the king, all that we bring is the Keter, our crown, our accomplishments. And the Gemara says Vashti refused to come. Why? One opinion says she became leprous. Even though she would have loved to show off her beauty, she became leprous. Another, one of the sages says she sprouted a tail. What does this mean? On the deeper level, what does it mean she sprouted a tail? Who has a tail? Animals have a tail. Meaning that she recognized then that she couldn't come before the king, before God. She had nothing to show. She had lived an animalistic life. And therefore she refused to come. She did not want to come. The king is furious over here. Pasuk Yud Gimel, and he says to the Chachamim Yodei Yidim, he said, he called, according to the Gemara, he called his Jewish advisors. The Jewish advisors did not want to get involved over here because they knew if they say don't do anything to Vashti, that's an insult to the king. If they say kill Vashti, then he's going to be upset later on. Why'd you tell me to kill the queen? Right? She was my connection to royalty. Therefore, they realized this was a no-win situation and they bowed out. And therefore, he brought these other advisors, Yudalit. And to know, Kedat Malasot B'malka Vashti, Pasuk Tetvav 15. What should be done with Malka Vashti? Now, what with Queen Vashti? Meaning this was a very, very, very difficult situation. On one hand, he desperately wanted to keep Vashti. Why? Because she was Hamalka Vashti. Order, right? Queen Vashti. She was inherently the queen, which lent credence, credibility to his reign. But again, he undermines himself if she acts in such a degrading way to him, refusing what he asked her to do, and nothing happens. So then it undermines him. Interesting. You see over here that he is trying to backpedal. What should be done with Queen Vashti, who didn't follow the word, the bidding of the king, conveyed by the chamberlains? Meaning, she didn't refuse me. I sent some messengers and she refused to do what the messengers had said. Vayomer Memuchan steps up and speaks. Memuchan, we're told, is actually another name for Haman. What does Muchan mean? Ready, prepared. He is prepared for his own demise. And he goes ahead and says, Vashti, lo lamelech levado, avta Vashti hamalka. He wants no part of this queen Vashti. No. Who is it? It's Vashti the queen. Haman is trying to knock her down. He wants to get rid of Vashti. Why? Because he wants the power. And if Achashverosh is married to this royal person, that gives Achashverosh credibility. Haman wants the power, and therefore he wants to get rid of this Vashti. And he says she has rebelled against everyone, against against the king, all the officials, right? All the wives will start to dismiss their husband's bidding, right? If she's able to get away with it, therefore she should be lo tavo posuk yutet. Let a royal edict be proclaimed. Asher lo tavo Vashti. That Vashti should not Queen Vashti, not Vashti the queen, just Vashti. 1253, verse 19, cannot come before the king Achashverosh and will give away her kingdom to someone else who is even more beautiful than her. Ru'uta means someone of equal stature who is even more beautiful than she. And that is what happened. And that is what they sent out. And Vashti, of course, was put to death. Perek Bet, chapter. After this, when the king's anger subsided, he remembered Vashti and all that had happened, and they said, let us seek for the king a replacement. Narot, young ladies, betulot, virgins, tovot mareh, of beautiful appearance. And the king ordered officers, and they gathered all of these girls to Shushan Habira, and the most beautiful one would reign in the place of Vashti. That was the idea that was offered, and the matter was good in the eyes of the king, and he did this. Now we have Pasuk Chet that we mentioned before. Pasuk Hey, Ish Yehudi. There was a Jewish person in Shushan whose name was Mordechai ben Yor Mishimish Yehudi, and here once again we switch to the tune of Eicha. We read, Ish Yehudi Shushan Abira, Ushma Mordechai ben Yor ben Shimi, ben Kish Ish Yemini, Asher Hegla Mirushalayim, Imagola Asher Haglisa, Imichanya Melech Yehuda, Asher Hegla Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel, who have been exiled from Jerusalem, along with the other exiles, who Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled. We're talking about the exile over here. Remember, this is the end of the 70 years towards the end of the 70 years of the Babylonian exile. And he was raising Hadassah, Esther, because she did not have any parents. And when the word of the king reached there, Esther was taken to the palace. And suddenly Esther rises to the top. Of all the girls that are gathered there, Esther rises to the top, page 1254. All along, even though she seems to be very, very popular there, Pasuk Yud, Lo higida Esther et ha'ma ve'malata, ki Mordechai tziva aleha, asher lo tagid. Esther would not tell of her nationality. She do not reveal that she was a Jewish girl, a Jewish woman, because Mordechai had commanded her not to tell. And Mordechai is there pacing in front of the Beit HaNashim to know how is Esther faring, what is happening with Esther. And each girl would come before the king. She would come in the evening, and then she would leave in the morning. So the psukim are delicately telling us how Achashverosh was determining who would be his queen. She would come in the evening and return back to the house to the house where all the women were in the morning. So he was sleeping with each and every one of them. And then Esther is brought. And Vayehav Pasuk Yazayin, the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and he placed the crown upon her head, and she was then crowned in the place of Vashti. And he made a big party at that point, right? But nevertheless, Esther is not Mageret Moladata. Esther would not tell of her lineage. He came Kasher Tziva Lea Mordechai, as Mordechai had commanded her. And this is very, very important, very interesting. At this point, it would seem there's no reason not to tell of her lineage. It will only help, right? It'll be good, right? Here she's the queen. Let the king know that she is Jewish, and that way it'll bode well for the Jews of all the kingdom. But Mordechai had told her not to tell. And even though she thought, well, maybe now it makes more sense to tell, Mordechai had told her not to tell. She did not tell. And of course, that was crucial towards the ultimate redemption. Pasuk Chaf 21. There's an assassination plot against Achashverosh by Bigtan and Teresh. The matter became known to Mordechai. To the Gemara, he spoke their language. He was a member of Sanhedrin, spoke 70 languages. They were conversing in their language, thinking no one else knew it. Mordechai knew it, overheard, and reported to Esther. Esther told the king in Mordechai's name about this planned assassination plot. The matter was investigated, and it was found, and the two of them were killed, and it was written down in the book of Chronicles before the king. Perek Gimel, chapter 3. After this, the king elevated Haman and placed him above all the other officers. Only after this event with Bigtan and Teresh, with the assassination plot that Mordechai revealed to Esther, and Esther told the king, and the king investigated, was true, and it was written down in the book of Chronicles. Only after that was Haman elevated. This is the concept that there's always refuah kodem lamachala. The healing precedes the malady. Before Haman could be elevated, we needed to have in place already that Mordechai had saved the king's life, because, of course, once again, that will be instrumental. And these are all pieces of the puzzle of everything being organized, arranged, orchestrated, synchronized, the divine providence setting everything up in a very natural and discreet manner. Now everyone had to bow down to Haman. But Mordechai would not bow and would not prostrate himself. And the servants said to Mordechai, why are you going against the command of the king? And Mordechai refused to listen to it. Then they told Haman. They wanted Haman, make sure Haman would see that Mordechai, the Jew, is not bowing down. Pasuk Hey, Vayar Haman ki Mordechai kamishachavelo. And Haman saw Mordechai was not bowing down, and he became filled with rage. But it was too lowly for him. It would be very petty for him. Oh, he's not bowing down to me. I'm going to kill him. And therefore, what did he want to do? He decided he wanted to take it out al Am Mordechai, on the whole nation of Mordechai. The whole Jewish people would suffer for this. And he wanted to destroy, to annihilate every Jew that was in the kingdom. And what did he do? He peeled poor. He threw lots. Hu agoral. That's why the holiday is called Chag Purim, because of the poor, because of the lots that Haman threw, but that's only in the singular. Purim is in the plural. There are the lots, the haphazard rolling of the dice of a Haman, and there's also that other type of poor. There is the Goral, there is the destiny, there is the divine orchestration. And that was the clash of this holiday. Haman's drawing lots. When should the Jews be destroyed? And the divine orchestration from above, making sure that this nefarious plan would not succeed. And he drew the lots, b'chodesh harishon, hu chodesh Nisan, right? On the month of Nisan is when he drew these lots, and it came out, liom chodesh chodesh, the day, the month, came out to the 12th month, the month of Adar. That would be the date set for the decimation, for the final solution of the Jewish people, that we would all be completely destroyed. That was Haman's plan. But what did he need to do now? He needs to get Achashverosh on. So therefore, in Pasuk Chet, and he says, Achashverosh, there is a nation all spread out amongst the nations, and they do their own thing, and they don't keep the laws of the king. It's not worth having them around. Let's have them destroyed, Pasuk Tet, and I will give a nice donation of 10,000 bars of silver to the Ginzei HaMelech, to the treasury of the king. What was the king's reaction? He took off his signet ring and he gave it to Haman. And he said, keep the money, and this people, this nation, you could do with them whatever it is that you want. Notice Haman never said to him exactly which people it was, right? He wanted to keep it under the radar. And then letters were sent out to all the Medinot, telling everybody, telling all the officers of each state, of each area, written inside with the stamp of the king, that will be the day to get together. Lashmi la rogel abeid, Pasuk Yud 13, to destroy all the Jews, young to old, men, women, children, on the 13th day of the 12th month, and everyone could keep all the spoils. All this went out with these letters going out to the entire kingdom. Get ready for the 13th day of Adar, when we will annihilate all of the Jews. Pasuk Perek Daled, chapter 4. Mordechai yada et kol asher nasa. Mordechai, he too being an officer, he found out what these letters contained, and he tore his garments, and he put on his sackcloth and ashes, and he went out into the city, and he cried out a great, big, bitter cry. And he came before the gate of the king, but you couldn't go there to the gate of the king wearing a sackcloth. And wherever the Jews heard about this decree, there was fasting, there was crying, there was eulogizing. And Esther's maidservants come to her and tell her, your Mordecai is out there in a sackcloth. She sent garments to Mordecai for him to wear. We turn to page 1256, right? But he did not accept it. Esther called Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, and she told him to go to Mordecai. Ladat mazeh ve'al mazeh. What's going on? Why is he acting in such a way? What is happening that I am unaware of? Hatach went to Mordecai. Mordecai told him all that had happened, all that was taking place, and about these letters that were being sent out. Hatach came back and told Esther the word of Mordecai. Esther said to tell Mordecai, I'm sorry. And Mordecai told Hatach, tell Esther she must go before the king to plead on behalf of her people. Hatak comes and tells it to Esther. Esther sends back. Everyone knows that anyone who comes before the king into his inner chamber who was not summoned will be put to death unless the king extends the golden scepter to that person. And I have not been called for 30 days. Therefore, it doesn't make sense. Let me not go uninvited. Let me wait until he asks me, he summons me, then I'll go. They told Mordechai Esther's response. Mordechai said to tell Esther, look at Pasuk Yud Gimel, very important Pasuk. Al tidami v'nafshech limaleit beit hamelech mikol Yehudim. Don't think that you will be saved in the house of the king from all the Jews. Ki macharesh tacharishi be'et hazot. If you will be silent, inactive at this time, revach v'atzala yamol Yehudim makom acher. Saving, right? The Jews, deliverance will come to the Jews from elsewhere, but you and the house of your father, Tovedu, will be destroyed. Umi odea, and who knows, im le'ed kazot higat b'malchut. If it wasn't for this moment that you have reached this royal position. So fascinating. Mordechai doesn't say, you're our only hope. We need you, Esther. He said, listen, Esther, we are part of this eternal nation. We will survive this. If you don't step up, God will send deliverance from elsewhere. We are going to survive this as a nation. Individuals, no guarantee. As a nation, we will survive this. So therefore, it's not that because of you, we will survive or won't survive. No. It's the question of what role will you play? Will you be the heroine who stuck your neck out for your people and through you this deliverance came? Or will you be the villainess who said, I'm safe here in the palace, all's good for me, I'm not going to take any chances, in which case you will be destroyed. If not in this world, then in the next world. Because this is your opportunity. God is going to arrange things. God will make sure it ends up the way it needs to end up. The question is, what role are you going to play? And that's the question we need to ask ourselves always. What role am I going to play in this God world of ours? Esther said, tell Mordechai as follows. Gather all the Jews in Shushan and let them fast. No eating, no drinking for 3 days. Yomam, Yamim, Laila V'yom. Not one of these fast by day and eat by night. No, 72 consecutive hours. No one eating, no one drinking. And then I'll come to the king. Vayavor Mordechai. And Mordechai then left and did what Esther had commanded him. And he spread the word. Now, Vayavor also is from the root word of an Aveirah. They fasted 3 days. What month is all this taking place? The month of Nisan. The month of Nisan. What holiday is the month of Nisan? Pesach, coming up in a little more than a month. The 3 days encompassed the holiday of Pesach. There was no Seder that year for all the Jews of Shushan. That's Vayavor Mordechai. That they did this Aveirah of not having a Pesach Seder because they were fasting. Of course, it was the right thing to do. But this was out of the norm. Perek Hey, chapter 5. And it was on the 3rd day. Esther donned royalty. The Gemara says, what do you mean she donned royalty? She could don royal garments. How do you don royalty? The Gemara says, no, Malchus is talking about Malchut Shamayim, the royalty, the kingdom of heaven. She reached a point She reached a level of Ruach HaKodesh. She was in this elevated spiritual state, and she went into the inner chamber of the king. The king was sitting on his throne there, and it was when he saw Esther standing there, she found favor in his eyes, and he extended this golden scepter to her, and he said to her, Malach Esther Amalka. What is it, Esther Amalka? She looked terrible. She looked terrible. 72 hours, not eating, not drinking. The Gemara says she could hardly stand up. She had an angel on either side of her helping her stand up. Now, this makes no sense at all. You're going before the king. You got to look good. You've got to present yourself beautifully. You've got to find favor in his eyes. You don't want to walk in there schlepping like you're about to fall off your feet. But she understood, this is not about me and the king. This is about me and the king. This is not me and Achashverosh. This is me and Hashem. And therefore she reached this elevated spiritual state. She was not dealing with that Melech, Achashverosh. She was dealing with God. And that's how she reached this elevated state, and we'll soon see. And the king said, what is it? Right? Up to half the kingdom I'll give to you. And she said, if before the king it is good, let the king and Haman, Yavo HaMelech v'Haman Hayom, let the king and Haman come today to a party, to a banquet that I've prepared, Asher Asiti, that I prepared, lo, for him. Why is she invited Achashverosh and Haman? The Gemara gives a whole host of reasons. But one of the reasons was to arouse the jealousy of Achashverosh against Haman. Imagine your spouse says, I'd love to have a little intimate get-together, just me and you, and there should not be any and. It should be me and you. And here she wants a little get-together, a little banquet with just you, Achashverosh, and Haman. All of a sudden, Achashverosh's jealousy is aroused against Haman. And the other officers' jealousy is aroused against Haman. Vayomer HaMelech, the king said, Ma'aru et Haman. Right? And then it's very, very, very unclear. For the party that I've made low for him. It's a hanging pronoun. Who is him? Is it me? Or is it Haman? Right? Left hanging over here. The king said, rush Haman to do the word of Esther. And they came to that party that day. And the king said to Esther at the party, what is it that you'd like? Up to half the kingdom, I'll do it. And she said, She'elati ubakashati, my request, my petition is, if I found favor in the eyes of the king, if before the king it is good to do my request and to fulfill my petition, what is it? Let the king and Haman come tomorrow again to a party. And then I will tell you what it is that I want. Haman walked out on top of the world. And then what happens? He walks by the gate of the king. At the gate of the king, everyone's bowing down to him. Who's at the gate of the king? Mordechai. And Mordechai is not moving. And he's filled with rage. But he contains himself. He gets home and he tells his family about the incredible honors that he's been given and his wealth and all this. And Esther invited me to come to the party. No one was invited besides me. And tomorrow I'm invited again. But Chol Zeh Einenu Shavali, he says. All of this is worth nothing to me when I see Mordechai the Jew sitting by the gate of the king. Zeresh, his wife, says, simple. Make a gallows 50 cubits high. Go in the morning to the king and tell the king you want to hang Mordechai on that gallows. And that way you'll be able to go to the party later that day in a good spirit. Everything will be good. Haman loved that idea. He prepared the gallows. That night, chapter 6, Nadadash Nata Melech, the king could not sleep. He's wondering, going to the Gemara, why does she keep inviting? What does she want to ask of me? And why is she inviting Haman? What is going on over here? maybe she's going to ask for something really, really big. Well, how could she ask something really big? Maybe I owe someone big, right? And if I haven't paid what I owe this person, then she could ask for who knows what. So he asked for the book of Chronicles to be brought before him, and it was read there. And it was read that Mordechai had saved his life by telling about the conspiracy of Bigsan and Teresh to assassinate him. And the king said, Mordechai, what great honor was given to Mordechai for that? And they said nothing at all. Achashverosh realized, oh, I better do something for Mordechai quickly, and that way when Esther asks on behalf of Mordechai, I could say, already taken care of. Don't worry. He said, Mi b'chatzer, who was in the courtyard? V'Haman ba, and Haman had just come to the courtyard in order to tell the king to hang Mordechai on the gallows that he had prepared low for him. Once again, a hanging pronoun. He had prepared it for him. He thought for him and for Mordechai. But in fact, who had Haman prepared it for? None other than himself. The servants of the king said, oh, Haman is in the courtyard. The king said, let him come. Haman comes in, and the king says to him, he's about to ask to hang Mordechai in the gallows. The king says to him, what should I do for a person? Asher HaMelech Hafetz Bikaro, that the king wants to honor him. Haman said in his heart, Lemi Yachbotz HaMelech Lasot Yikar Yoter Mimeni. To whom will the king want to honor more than me? He must be asking about how to honor me. What does Haman say? Oh, the person the king wants to honor, bring the garments that the king wore when he was coronated, and the horse that the king wore when he was coronated, Asher Nitan, when the crown was put onto his head. And let's put the garments and the horse into the hand of one of the officers, and let him clothe that person, and then ride him on the horse through the streets of the city, and call out, Kacha, Yaselish, Shamelech Hafetz Bikaro. This is what should be done for a person that the king wants to honor. The king heard that, and he said to Haman, quickly, take the garments and the horse, exactly like you said, and do all of that for Mordechai HaYehudi, for Mordechai the Jew. Don't leave anything out. Haman took the garments and the horse, and he clothed Mordechai, and he led him through the city, and he called out, this is what should be done for a man that the king wants to honor. Afterwards, Mordechai went back to the Shar HaMelech, to the gate of the king, still wearing his sackcloth. Very nice. Thank you very much, Yasher Koach. But this hasn't changed anything. The decree is still there against the Jews. Haman went back to his house, all upset, all disrupted. Haman told Zeresh's wife all that had happened. He came back. Oh, did the king agree to hang Mordechai? Not exactly. Actually, I'm just leading him through the streets wearing royal garments. Zeresh says to him, if Mordechai is from the Jews, once you started to fall before him, then you will not prevail against him. You shall fall before him. They're still talking. The officers come to rush Haman to that party with Esther. And he comes to that party now. And the king says to Esther on the second day, chapter 7, what is it, Esther, that you want? And she says to him, if I found favor in your eyes, if before the king it is good, I want my life. I'm asking for my people, because we've been given away to be destroyed. Achashverosh says to Esther Amalka, who? Me, who's there? Ve'ezehu, who has done this? Who is trying to do this? Vatomer Esther answers, Ish Tsarvo Yev, Haman Hara Hazeh. According to the Gemara, she first pointed to Achashverosh and said, it was you. You're the one who's really in power. Why? Because she was not dealing with Achashverosh. She wasn't dealing with that Melech. She was dealing with this Melech. She was dealing with God. An angel came along, the Gemara says, and moved her hand and said, well, let's work it this way instead. And she pointed to Haman instead. And the king got up in his fury, and he went out to the garden. Haman stood up to beg for his life from Esther, because he saw that the king was furious with him. And the king came back from the garden, and Haman nofel al mitah, and Haman had fallen onto the bed where Esther was. And the king said, do you also want to conquer, to assault the queen, or to conquer the queen? My queen, when I'm here in the house? Haman knew it was all over. One of the officers said, hey, look out the window. I see a gallows over there. That's the gallows that Haman had made for Mordecai. Mordecai, the one who had spoken well about the king and saved your life. And the king said, hang him on those gallows. And Haman was hung on that gallows, and the king's anger subsided. The king, not a king Achashverosh. So it's both the king and the king's his anger subsided. Mordecai comes before the king. The king gives his ring now that he given to Haman. He gave it to Mordecai, but the decree is still in place. And therefore Esther speaks to the king, falls before him, that we have to change this decree. And therefore the king says, you can send out. Pasuk Zayin, chapter 8, verse 7, right? And you could write, Pasuk Chet, you could write for the Jews whatever you want, and be signed with the signature of the king, but it cannot be completely reversed. So the decree stayed in place, but it was slightly altered. Instead of the Jews being destroyed, the Jews will be able to take revenge against their enemies. That they will be able to, on that 13th day of Adar, they'll be able to go to fight against their enemies. And then it was chapter 9, on the 12th month, the month of Adar, on the 13th day. So there, the day that had been set for the destruction of the Jews, v'nahapochu, it was turned upside down, it was reversed. And now the Jews were able to fight against their enemies, and they gathered, and they fought their battles there. And the 10 sons of Haman, page 1260, the 12 sons of Haman were hung. That was on the 13th day of Adar. That is Wednesday. That is Tanis Esther. That is the day that we fast. Tomorrow is a fast day. Why are we fasting? Not because Esther fasted. Esther fasted back in the month of Nisan, about 11 months before this. Why are we fasting tomorrow? Because that's the day that had been set for our destruction, and instead we went into battle against our enemies. And when Jews would go into battle, they would fast. Even though it's counterintuitive, I don't have my strength, but nevertheless they would fast because they know that we don't deal with Hamelech, we deal with Hamelech. We don't deal with the battle, we deal with God. And therefore they would go in fasting in an elevated spiritual state. And these days, and in Shushan, where there was such a concentration of enemies, they needed to battle the 13th and the 14th. And therefore they only rested and celebrated on the 15th. That's why Friday is Shushan Purim. Thursday is the day that most of the people relaxed, celebrated after the battle, and that's our day of celebration of Purim. Shushan and cities, walled cities like Jerusalem, Tiberias, they battled 13th and 14th. They celebrated on the 15th, so that is also Shushan Purim. In Jerusalem, Purim is celebrated not on the 14th, not Thursday, but on the 15th, this year on Friday. The Jews accepted upon themselves. Let's see, Pasuk Chavav, page 1261. Perek Tet, Pasuk Chavav. Al Kain Karu, Purim al Shem Apur. That's why these days are called Purim, because of the different lots, the destinies that were set. Okay, I'll call the give it a zos. Umaruma kacha magi alehem. Kimu v'kiblo yudim. Alehem the alzaram. V'kolim alehem. The Jews accepted upon themselves, and all those who had joined them. There were many converts at this point who were joining the Jewish people. To celebrate these 2 days, the Chol Shana v'Shana, each and every year. And these days are remembered every generation, every family, every city. And these days of Purim never will leave from amongst the Jews. Their memory will never stop from all of their descendants. That's it. That brings us to where we need to be. Woo! At 10 a.m. That was a photo finish. I should go into the Olympics. That was amazing. Okay, that is our Purim. The one thing that I did leave out, the psukim, that and therefore let's take a quick look at the very top. Again, on top of 1261 pasuk Yud Tet, and therefore they made these days of simcha umishloach manot ish l're'ehu, and a day of mishloach manot, of sending gifts, sending food gifts. Ish l're'ehu, each person to their friend. That's how we learn out mishloach, sending. Manot is in the plural. 2 food items. Ish l're'ehu, at least one person to one friend. That's the minimal. 2 food items to at least one person. The other mitzvah that we have is, let's turn to look down to verse 22. Right? The day that was changed from tragedy to rejoicing, from mourning to holiday, to make it Yemei, days of Mishta v'Simcha. Once again, Mishloach Manot Ish l'Re'ehu, sending food gifts, a person to a friend, Umatanot le'Evyonim, and also giving gifts to the poor. Matanot, plural, Evyonim, plural. So that's what we need to give, Matanot, to 2 different people. And once again, either online or in person, for those who want, I will serve as your agent to distribute funds to people in need on Purim Day itself. You can get the money to me, cash or a check, or you can go onto our website, bethjacobirvine.org. On the Levyonim, you can make an online donation, and then I will have all that money ready to be given out on Purim Day. It was Haman's accusation against us is that we are mufuzar and mufurad. We're spread out. There's a lack of unity amongst us. And therefore, Purim, we all gather together. We gather together for the reading. We gather together for su'udot, for festive meals. And we help out one another. We increase the brotherhood, sisterhood amongst us by giving these gifts and helping out one another, recognizing we are all one entity. Let me wish everybody a Purim Sameach, a very, very joyous Purim, and look forward to seeing you. Megillah reading tomorrow night, 7:45, and then again on Thursday. And for those who've RSVP'd, hope you all have, because we're having a massive Seudah on Thursday afternoon. Look forward to seeing everybody. For tomorrow night, there's a meal after that. There's no RSVP necessary. Also be a carnival and a hypnotist. A lot going on. Please, please, please come join us. Purim Sameach, everybody. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Purim Sameach.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was
Purim
fast.
You're very, very
Thank you.
Happy Purim.
happy Purim.